All right, so I'm going to chat with you guys a little bit about curls. These are all done from one workout. This was done at the very end of my workout after all my benching and back work and other stuff. I did these 3 sets of curls, and it went into my training vlog, and it kind of brings up the question of curls, because people seem to think for some reason I'm against curls. I'm really not. I'm not even against bicep training. I think the issue here is that people expect that you're going to see massive, just overnight gains if you do a bunch of curls. And that it's not just an addition to your back work, right? And that, things like rows and pull-ups and chin-ups don't build biceps. Well, they clearly do. The research shows that they do. It's just that curls can bring a little bit more to the table. And the thing is, when you understand that curls are being done as a secondary exercise, and in novices, they may not really add much of anything. There have been a few studies on novice lifters that found that like lat pull downs maximized bicep development. People in their first 6 months in the gym, and that adding curls didn't really do anything. Okay, but that's not to say that it can't as you get a little more advanced, right? But it's understanding that they're really a secondary exercise, and I think my problem is that a lot of people overuse them, meaning they end up with a lot of overuse in the biceps. They end up having tendons inflamed. And how often do you see bodybuilders, for example, who have to wrap up their elbows, stuff like that? Instead of looking at something like this and going, okay, why am I doing a curl? And in my case, to get a little more bicep, right? Because my rowing tends to grow my back. My back is extremely well developed. My biceps tend to lag behind. And I find that a little bit of curling and doing some bicep work helps stabilize my bench press better. Right, it can help improve bench press. It can add just overall size of the upper body. But I think the problem is, again, people overuse this stuff. And instead of just doing simple movements, they don't understand that the bicep is, number one, a very simple muscle. It is one of the least complicated major muscles in the entire body. It does very little in terms of functions. I mean, for the most part, if the only thing you ever do is just bend your elbow, like just do a curl like I'm doing right here, you're activating the vast, overwhelming majority of fibers in the bicep. You really are, right? Just a simple curl, getting into the lengthened position. It's that people think that a muscle like the bicep needs 5 different angles. That's where it gets ludicrous, where they're doing 20 sets of single joint exercises a week. Well, that just leads to overuse. The thing is, when you look at studies, what have we found? Biceps actually seem to need a little less volume than most muscles to actually get really, really good growth. Okay, and I think they're prone to overuse. And look how many bicep tears you see. In fact, someone who I'm friends with, someone who interacts with me a little online, who's well known, I'm not going to call him out on it. So I'm going to call him by name, but people probably know he just tore a bicep doing preacher curls. Tore it. Massive rupture. And I always tell people things like preacher curls are dangerous. Too much of a good thing, right? Putting a little stretch into that lengthened position, hey, that's a great thing. Doing a bunch of heavy preacher curls leads to injuries. That's an exercise that really puts the bicep in a vulnerable position because people have overcomplicated a muscle. Like, oh, how can I try to isolate it further? Well, muscles don't really like to be isolated, for one. And if you're not careful, certain things that lock you into unnatural positions, trying to isolate things can actually put tendons at angles that cause inflammation, and in some cases, and in worst cases, increase the risk of rupture. Preacher curl is one of those. It's really a bicep tear, right? We see it a lot. Whereas with something like a dumbbell, barbell, it's a little more free-flowing. You're not locked in. You can still get the full range of motion, the lockout at the bottom, which is really where most of the growth happens. Look at the research. That's where you're going to get most of the growth. Just try to get the elbow locked at the bottom. All right? Get a pump. Treat the exercise like what they are. Now, if we're going to do power curls, we can do really heavy weight. Still need to be somewhat moderate to high reps. I like power curls. You guys see me do power curls. But they allow you to go into that lengthened position without loading it at weird angles because you can lean forward at the bottom. Okay. Same with something like this. You can get into the lengthened position. But everybody's like, well, you have to do this and you have to squeeze and you have to do these things. Well, that's fine. The guys who have amazing bicep genetics get away with all that, and it works because they have amazing bicep genetics. I personally found that for me, who has really bad bicep genetics, I've had to actually do a lot of work for even the most modest development. It just doesn't seem to work. All those tips and tricks, coming in doing 20 sets of small exercises has never done anything. However, doing something like this where I come in with either a power curl, dumbbells or whatever after I've done it, I actually get a little bit of growth. As long as I create a lot of fatigue, okay? As long as I create a lot of fatigue, meaning sets real close to failure or to failure, very, very, very close. We don't have to go to absolute failure, but you do need to work hard enough to create some fatigue. 5, 6 sets. And I would say for most people, if your biceps are lagging and you need to do some curls, 5 or 6 sets a week. If you're strong at all your pulling, right? Because that's going to do most of the work. If you're strong at your pulling, you're real good at rows. Biceps are still lagging. You know what? Hey, throw some curls in. Not a big deal. Be selective in those movements. Okay, ask yourself, what am I trying to get out of this exercise? And I think something like a standard dumbbell curl like this works great. Covers the functions of the bicep just fine. And as far as the twisting of the wrist, that actually is not a growth stimulus, by the way, for those who do that. Make it a little bit harder as far as the contraction goes by maybe, notice my hands are really close to the one side. They're towards the inner plate, right? Okay. Little things like that. One of the benefits of the dumbbell, and you can really get a good stretch at the bottom. But if you want to use a barbell, you can use a little body English. Main thing is making sure you get the full range at the bottom. Lean forward a little. That's really where the growth is. And don't overdo it. Don't come in and try to do forced reps. Don't do crazy preacher curls. No need for any of that. Simple barbell, dumbbell movements. Take until it burns right there to where you're kind of getting to failure. Or, occasionally some of these sets I do kind of reach failure, That's all you need. 5 or 6 sets a week if you're pushing your rows and stuff hard. It'll get the job done. Stimulate, don't annihilate. And this is coming from someone who's not gifted in the bicep department. I'm just not. I don't have the insertions. I've never had amazing biceps. This is about the only thing that does anything. I've done a lot of other stuff that didn't cause any growth, that people swear by who have great biceps didn't do anything. Nothing. Don't overcomplicate it and don't overdo it. Just train hard, get in, get it done, get out. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.